Welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. I really hope you enjoy this one.
Okay, so today what I want to talk about is counters. So I went through, just made a couple of little edits to the counters since we're in a new year. So uh, I the reason I think it's important that we go through the counters is one, as a listing agent, knowing the basic counters, the information, the verbiage, the stuff that I need to know, what I need to write in my counter offers. Um, and as a buyer's agent, kind of understanding where some of the counters are coming from. So that you guys don't get caught off guard, or you're able to have conversations with your buyers to be able to explain to them when you get the counter offers back on listings what they're for and why they're doing it. Okay, make sense? So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, and what you're going to see on the screen share is not only a copy of the RPA, but a PDF copy of the counter offers, the common counters that some of you guys have gotten it in the past when we've done other classes. So you'll be able to see what that looks like. And then when the class is over, if you want to shoot me an email, you're welcome to email me, and I will respond to the email with a copy of these counters so that you guys have them. And they're set up very specific way. They go paragraph by paragraph. So it's really easy for you when you get to a paragraph of the contract. If you want to question what the counter may or may not be for that, you can look right at it, and it's written right there by paragraph. So I'm going to share my screen right now for you guys. So what you should be looking at right now is the PDF copies of the counters and the RPA. So I'm not going to go into the disclosure regarding agency relationships and all the other stuff that comes with the RPA because we just talked about it last week. What I do want to talk about, though, is in these counters exactly how we're going to look at them with the RPA and the explanation behind it. All right, so let's get started. So first off, as you look at the way I have the counters written, I start right away with paragraph 1B. And paragraph 1B is the property address. Now, the reason I don't have a counter for 1A is because we don't know the buyer's names, so we don't know to counter to correct them, right? So that's not something that we're probably going to address in a counter offer as a listing agent. But just for you guys as buyer's agents, when you're writing the offer, make sure that that buyer's name is the correct legal name and you have everything in there. So technically, our first counter really is going to be paragraph 1B, which is the property address. And as listing agents, we've got to make sure that we're paying attention to what that property address is, because it's really easy. I know I would almost guarantee there's people on the class that are listening right now that have in the past written an offer where there was some kind of error in the address, whether it was a misspelling of the street name or transposing some numbers. It happens all the time. So as listing agent, that's the first thing that we have to look at to make sure that the things are correct in this offer, because that's ultimately what our job is as backstop with listing agent when we receive our offers, is making sure that the offer was written properly. And that's the first thing, is the address. So if there were an issue with the address, the counter would be: buyer is aware that the address on the RPA is incorrect. Correct address is, write the correct address. Buyer to verify any consistencies prior to open of escrow. Okay, because what we're doing is, they may have written the offer thinking they were writing an offer on another property, so let's make sure we give them the proper address. Second one, buyer is aware the address, whatever the unit was created for, an unpermitted unit, is not a legal address, because people do that. They just make up, like, 122.5 for the garage conversion that they have in the back, and the post office will recognize it. So it's an address that gets used by people, but it's not recognized by the city as a legal address. It's not a legal unit. That's something that you should be disclosing if you're having those two addresses and you're selling something with an illegal unit. Now, the next part of that of 1B is the assessor's parcel number. If an assessor's parcel number is on the purchase agreement, check and make sure it's correct. If it isn't correct, here's the counter for it. Buyer is aware that the APN number is incorrect. The correct APN number is, and stated. Those are all pretty straightforward counters, but they are common. It happens more often than you would think that property addresses and APN numbers are incorrect on those offers that are written. So the idea of having something like this counter sheet with you when you get your offers and you're reviewing them to see what needs to be countered will hopefully spark you to look at those paragraphs that are referenced here as in more detail to make sure that everything is correct on the offer. Don't think there is any, but any questions on that first paragraph 1B about the addresses? Anybody? Anybody? Let's see. Hi, can we have a copy? Yes, as I stated at the very beginning, if you want a copy of that, you can email me after the class is over and I will send it to you. Absolutely, you can have a copy of the sheet. All right, next up, confirmation of agency. So we've talked about the disclosure regarding agency relationships in the past. We talked about it last week, but that disclosure is just that. It's a disclosure on how you can be represented, right? A buyer's agent, a listing agent, or a dual agent, we're representing both. In the RPA, paragraph 2B is the confirmation. This is confirming what the agency is, who's representing the buyer, who's representing the seller, or if the agent is representing both. If this is incorrect, it has to be countered, okay? If that item is incorrect, because that's our confirmation of agency, it has to be countered. So here we would counter it. Buyer and seller are aware that Century 21 All Stars, right? We're the listing agent. License number 01280965 is the broker, and your name, the agent, and your license number is the agent representing the seller exclusively. And blank is the broker and blank is the agent representing the buyer exclusively, right? Their information, you need to put that in there. Clear it up. Now, you could do that in a counter, or there is an actual confirmation of agency form. If you want to go that far, you could write in there, confirmation of agency form is included with this counter offer. Please sign and return with this signed counter offer. You could go that far if you want to include an extra document. You don't have to do that. So you can just counter this information in for confirmation of agency. Now, maybe it's just they left off the license numbers. You can just counter back, hey, buyer to be aware, the license number for broker is, license number for agent is, and confirm that agency that way also. Okay. Questions? No. All right. So, like I said, we go right in order. So the very next thing is paragraph 3A, that is the sales price. Now, if at that time we're going to counter the sales price, the offer price, we'll do it then, because we're just going to do it in order of what happens in the contract. So purchase price to be, if you're increasing the sales price to be, and you write your new sales price amount in there. Now, I know that people do highest and best offers. I didn't put that in the counter because I think that's kind of ingrained in everybody is highest and best. I think that highest and best is probably overused or not used properly. I don't like highest and best. I don't like that at all. But if you're going to use highest and best, I think you should do highest and best with a minimum sales price of. Because I think sometimes highest and best or can backfire on as listing agent, especially when you send that multiple counter and you send highest and best out to even your offer that has the highest offer. Sometimes it makes them feel like they're betting against themselves. Maybe they don't respond, or you don't get any offers that are better and they back out because of it. I just think that it's always cleaner if we put in there highest and best offer with a minimum sales price of, so that it's clarified. Okay. The escrow period is next, paragraph 3B. Close of escrow 2B, blank days or sooner. I always like that. That's only if you're changing it for some reason, right? So, for example, if over here maybe they put a 45-day escrow and you want 30, or they put a 30-day escrow and you need a 60 for whatever the reason is, you would then counter what those days of escrow are. I don't like putting for a specific date. It just is too, it's not fluid enough, because if we do days after acceptance, we could always close earlier if everybody agrees. You can extend those based on days. I just don't like going up to a date but that's just personal preference. If you want to go for a specific date, if there's a reason you need that date, you can also counter close of escrow to be on a very specific date if you need that for your seller. But the dates I like to add blank days or sooner to my counters, because then it's getting everybody at the beginning to agree that it will close sooner. So if for a reason we both close, we have the ability for both of us to close on a sooner date and we sign off on it, they've already agreed to it. Okay. Expiration of offer. Okay. Added to this expiration of offer, even though it's kind of stated in the offer already, I like to add in there so that we know it's clarified. I want for the buyer's agent to be authorized to be the receiver of all documents, so that the time periods start when the buyer's agent gets it, not when the buyer receives the paperwork, right? So what we're doing in this counter is we're basically saying anything I send to you, buyer's agent, is saying that now the time periods start when you received it. Not if your clients were out of the town for the weekend and you got it on a Friday and they don't see it till Monday, it doesn't matter. The time period started when you received it. And so understanding that as a buyer's agent, when you see stuff like this is, you have to understand how your time periods are affected, right? Because if your buyers aren't available for a couple days, or it's a weekend when you receive something and you receive it, you got to assume that it's accepted, even though your buyers haven't seen it. Now, if they need to sign something else for the acceptance, that's different. But your paperwork, disclosures, anything else that you receive from this period on, you are the one who received it. If I'm not presenting my offers immediately, and this is something that listing agents don't do, and it's something that we should put into practice, is if I know that I'm not going to be presenting any offers, let's say so today we're on January 18th. I know I'm not going to present offers as listing agent until next week, right? Which, let's say next Wednesday, because my sellers are out of town. So next Wednesday is what date? That's the 26th, 25th, right? No, 24th. I know I'm going to present all my offers on the 24th. Well, all of these offers that I've received are going to expire in 3 calendar days. Right here, it's what that says. 3 calendar days after all buyers' signatures, right? That's when they're going to expire. And I know, even if I tell a buyer's agent as listing agent, I'm not presenting offers until next Wednesday, the 24th. You guys may know it because we've discussed this before in previous videos and previous classes. We've discussed, if you know that the seller's not going to present offers, please make sure that your offer doesn't expire until after that presentation. But if I know as listing agent, I am not going to present these offers to the 24th, I'm going to put in my counter, buyer agrees to extend expiration of offer to 25th, 26th, a couple days, maybe 2 days max, 3 days max after I'm going to present my offers. So I have time to write the counters, get everything back, and all those offers are still valid. Okay, I can do all this stuff on a multiple counter. I can do this on a single counter, right? If I'm just doing a seller's counter offer. But if I know that I'm not going to present until a later date, I'm going to, in my counters, make sure that your offer is valid. Bertha, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute. Ask your question.
Kind of confused how I'm going to give a counter if I haven't presented an actual offer.
Well, because the problem is that you're not giving the counter before you're presenting. What you're doing is you're saying, I didn't present till this date and now I'm countering you. So you're agreeing that your expiration date of this offer is 2 or 3 days after, because I'm giving it to you after I presented it, but your offer is expired before I presented it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? Like, I got your offer today. I'm not presenting it until next Wednesday. You're going to get your counter offer on Thursday or Friday. Even if you respond, you're going to respond by Saturday or Sunday. I'm just saying you're agreeing that the expiration of your offer is extended to a specific date to cover me sending you the counter, you reviewing the counter, and you getting it back to me before the offer expires. That's what I'm trying to get to.
So I'm gonna send an email stating
No. Your counter offer is just saying your expiration of offer. Because if I counter you today on an offer that you wrote me a week ago. Your offer has expired. It
Exactly.
expired in 3 days. But now I'm sending you a counteroffer. So what I'm referencing in the counteroffer is that your expiration of offer has been extended to a specific date to give you time for that offer to be valid for you to review, sign, and return the counter.
I see. But they can still back up anytime, no?
Well, no, of course. I mean, if they don't
Okay.
send your, if they don't agree to your counter, they've backed out.
Mm. Okay.
All we're saying is that the offer is still valid past the date that you got that it is by default, because everybody has a default date on their offer. Everybody leaves it as 3 days after it's signed by the buyers that this offer expires. That's the thing is you guys have to think about stuff like that. Is that if I present an offer that's already expired, it's not a valid offer. So even if we want to accept it, the buyer could just say, "Oh no, that offer is not valid any longer." All I want to say in my counter is that the buyer is acknowledging that this offer that was expired on a specific date is now extended to cover our negotiation of acceptance. That's it. That's what it's there for. So we got to think for so the counter should only address the extension. I mean, you only need to do that if it's expired. That's it. If it's past the expiration date, that's the only time that you have to put this counter in. If it's not, if you've written the counter, if you've gotten the offer and you're countering it within the 3 business days or within the 3 calendar days, this doesn't need to go in.
So in this case, if I'm representing a buyer, then I should just state that on the purchase contract, right? Extended date.
Absolutely. If you call me as buyer's agent, I'm the listing agent. You call me and say, "Hey, I'm submitting an offer on your property that I just showed. When are you guys presenting?" And I say, "Oh, we're not going to present till next week. We're not going to present until the 24th. Your expiration date on your offer should reach well past the 24th to make sure that you have time to get a counter and respond to that counter before the offer expires." That's what you should do as a buyer's agent. No buyer's agents on the planet do that. They don't do that. If you tell them I'm presenting on the 24th, they're like, "Great, here you go. Here's the offer, and it expires in 3 days." I'm just saying, as buyer's agent, we should do that. We don't. As a listing agent, I want to make sure I'm covering myself when that counter goes out. I want to make sure that offer its expiration date is after my counter period, so that I have a valid offer that I'm negotiating. That's it. All right, moving on. Next up, initial deposit. Initial deposit to be. I always tell you guys, it should be a minimum. I really think it should be a minimum of 10,000, but I gave you a little bit of a break. 7,500 to 10,000 deposit to be sent directly to escrow via electronic funds transfer within 3 business days of acceptance. Now, the default is the wire transfer. So if they've left it alone as a default of wire transfer that they're going to wire the funds in, then all you have to do is initial deposit to be and the amount. That's it. This second part, deposit to be sent directly to escrow via electronic funds transfer within 3 business, that part you don't need to answer because they've already done it. It's only if somehow they mark, a check or something else, right? They're going to give it by a personal check or by a cashier's check. We want the wire transfer. And I'm really happy that, I mean, it's been a couple of years now, but I'm really happy that CAR has made the default on the RPA as a wire transfer into escrow and not a check. Like it used to be, everybody wanted that check, right? We had that deposit check. We had a copy of the deposit check. We were emailing it or sending it with all of our offers, and then we had to have it in a trust ledger. It's just too much liability. It makes me so much happier that they do this wire transfer now. So if I'm addressing the deposit, for most of our sales prices, and that's why I put this amount in here, $7,500 to $10,000 is plenty. Now, when you start getting to higher sales prices and you're maybe 900, a million and stuff, and that's more and more common now with us in sales prices with the way the prices are going. Maybe you want people who have good size deposits, right? Down payments that they're putting in their own money, 3% of that sales price. And I think once you hit that $1 million threshold, I think that's legitimate to say, okay, I want 3% of the purchase price. That's what we want as a deposit. I think that's fair, because if I'm buying houses that are over $1 million, I'm putting a substantial amount of money down to purchase that. I have skin in the game. I think that deposit should be more. If we're looking at homes that are less than that, right, maybe in the 800 and down, I think $10,000 is legitimate for deposit for us to show that there is some commitment in that. And that's the reason I use that $10,000 limit, is because if there is ever a dispute um, concerning the initial deposit, then we get to go to small claims court to, argue that that dispute on whether we want the deposit as a seller, or we're trying to get the deposit released as the buyer. Either way, for both of us, what works is I get to go to small claims court to handle that. If we go anything above that 10,000, we can't go to small claims court to do that. We have to go through mediation, arbitration. Gets costly, gets lengthy. That's why I prefer that amount. Bertha, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Since I had an issue already a year ago, my client buyer deposited 15,000. So we just wanted to show we're strong. And unfortunately, the seller backed up. She didn't want to sell anymore. And she just disappeared from the scenario. So after a year, those 15,000 is still in the limbo. She didn't sign the release, and we're just gonna need to wait 2 years for the money to be transferred to the state. So that's what makes me kind of nervous to bring high deposits, because that situation. So
okay,
what's your comment about it?
First off, you shouldn't wait that long. If you file the mediation request, okay, so here's what happens. When escrow has your funds, the only way escrow can release it is, one, by the seller and the buyer agreeing to release all the funds, right? That's the common one. Everybody knows that. Or by a court order is the second way that escrow can release the funds. If you were to, even with $15,000, start a mediation claim and file against the seller and escrow, pay the $500 for the consumer mediation. Once escrow got once you guys got to mediation and the mediator says, I think you should go, even if it has to go to arbitration, escrow will release that money. You don't have to wait till it escheats to the state 3 years later. You don't have to wait for that. You could just file against escrow and get your money back.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So guys, even in a small claims case, for example, like we were talking about that limit of $10,000, when you file that small claims suit against the seller, you also have to file against escrow. And escrow knows that they are not doing anything wrong. They know why they're being included. Once you file against escrow, let's say, for example, I had 10,000, like in Bertha's case, it was 10,000, and we filed a small claims lawsuit. We filed it against the seller and we filed it against escrow. Seller doesn't show up to small claims court, but escrow does. The court will say, release their money immediately, and escrow will release it, and it's done. It's over. So always include escrow at anything escrow's holding it. Always include them as a defendant in any of the cases, and then that way the court can order them to release the funds. Okay. So how long is the wait for the seller to release the deposit? There is no time period on that. There is no time period. It's until you guys have some kind of a written agreement to release the funds. So it could be like Bertha just mentioned, that deposit has been there for a year, which I think that legally there's ways that they could go around and get escrow to release that, and they have to just start the process. But there is no time period on the release. Yes, Darwin?
Approximately how long has to be the wait? Let's say a month, 2, 3 before.
No, there is no wait. If you send a cancellation in, and then we're getting off topic from counters, but it's good. We'll answer the questions we need to. If you send a cancellation in requesting your deposit back, and you have the right to get that deposit back as a buyer, and the seller refuses to sign, I can file in small claims tomorrow if I want to, if they're refusing to sign. There's nothing, I don't have to wait a specific amount of time. I can file small claims right away against the seller and escrow, and vice versa for the seller the same way. But if we don't do anything, we take no action, we don't file in small claims, we just sit and wait for the seller to go ahead and sign, there is no time period. The seller can wait as long as they want. What what Bertha had mentioned was that if the money sits in escrow without any instruction for 3 years, it will escheat to the state, which means the state comptroller gets the money. They give them the money, and then it sits there until someone goes and claims it. And that's it. That's what happens. So yeah, there is no time periods. There's no waiting period for me before I can file a suit. There's none of that stuff. I can start right away. Rocio, go ahead.
If let's say you said $10,000 is to go to a small claim, but if it's over $10,000, I think there should be another way to go against the seller and against the escrow so the money gets released on a faster time, right?
Well, but it depends on what your purchase agreement says. Okay, first off, if the purchase agreement is initialed, and we'll talk about that later on in this class, if you initialed liquidated damages, then you have to go. I mean, not liquidated damage, dispute resolution. Then you have to go mediation first, then arbitration. If you didn't initial that, then you have to go mediation and then you go to litigation. So the amount of money is just what determines how we go around it. If it's $10,000 or less, there's no mediation necessary. We don't have to go to arbitration. We don't have to do any of that. We go straight to small claims court. If it's a higher amount, then unfortunately you got to go mediation arbitration to do that. That's it. That's your only way.
And who pays for the fees for that?
Who pays for that? Whoever files it. It's $500 to start the mediation process, and then whatever it costs to hire an arbitrator. And I don't know what that amount is, but whoever's initiating it pays it. You should, once there's a judgment against the seller, they're supposed to pay your legal fees back, but that's how it works.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's move on. So that's initial deposit. I think we should probably keep it in that $10,000 range again until you get to a bigger amount. Or if you're getting countered a larger amount, there's not much you can do if you want to get your offer accepted. I didn't put anything in for increased deposit because I was doing the most common things that we see that need to be addressed. So increased deposit's happening very rarely, okay? The first loan, right? This is paragraph 3E1. Buyer agrees to accept the maximum fixed interest rate of and blank and a maximum of 1% loan fees. Most people don't have loan fees anymore, but I'm going to put it in there in my counter just to make sure that if they do have them, that they're agreeing to it. The maximum interest rate. What happens? Remember, and I've mentioned this to get you guys a lot, is that maximum interest rate. If we don't have a good enough amount of that not to exceed interest rate here that we're looking at in 3E1. Even if the buyer has removed their loan contingency, let's say that we agree to a maximum interest rate of 6%. That's what was put in the offer. We didn't look at it as the listing agent, right? And then we get to the approval process, and the buyer has already removed their loan contingency because it was time for them to do that. And now they get an approval, and their rate is 6.5%. Their loan contingency doesn't stop their removal of loan contingency doesn't stop them from canceling and lose their deposit. So because they agreed to a maximum interest rate, if they can't fit in that maximum interest rate, they could technically cancel and not lose their deposit on the loan contingency because they're not getting a loan at the rate they agreed to or that we agreed to. That's a binding part of this contract. So leaving it blank, writing BPR in there because it doesn't call for letters. It says not to exceed blank percent. That's a number it's asking for. So BPR is not legitimate request for maximum interest rate. And what BPR is, for those of you guys that know, is best prevailing rate. And the reason that doesn't work is that's very vague. What does that mean, best prevailing rate? At the time I got my loan approval for this, my pre-approval, and the time I wrote this offer, or best prevailing rate at the time that the final loan approval comes through. So best prevailing rate is not an option for your maximum interest rate not to exceed. It is not an option. You need to have a number in there. So if I were you as listing agent, there's two things that I always would want to do is that the buyer is going to get pre-qualified or cross-qualified with my lender prior to open of escrow. I'm always going to put that in my counters. Secondly, I'm going to state if they send me a pre-approval letter and they're FHA and I know that the best rate for FHA, and I don't know what it is right now, 5 3/8 or whatever the number is at this moment, I'm going to add 1/4 to 0.5% to that interest rate on my own. Sometimes I'm the listing agent, maybe I'm going to even go a little bit higher and I'm going to say, okay, well, you're going to get a maximum rate of 7 because that 7% is going to cover probably where we are right now with the rates. Or what I can do is buyer to disclose maximum interest rate and loan fees being paid with this signed counteroffer. Now, when they disclose it, they say, here's what we're getting as our maximum interest rate. I prefer that I'm stating what interest rate they're going to accept if I'm going to get my offer accepted. If they're going to get their offer accepted with me, because I want to make sure that they're locked into the purchase. Okay. Yes, Tony, go ahead. Yes, Tony.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. I couldn't find it.
All right.
Okay, so would it be a good idea to, let's say the rate that they're getting is, I don't know, 6.5, that maybe we put like 6.25, just to kind of cover ourselves, you know, knowing that if anything should happen in the future, that okay, they, like you said, removing
Well,
the
did you wait? Did you mean 6.75, or did you mean
no,
6? Because you said their rate was 6. You said their rate is 6.5.
right. Let's say they're getting a 6.5 rate. That's what they're aiming, you know, that's what the lender
Right.
offered. But on the offer, I put, you know, 6.25
You're talking as a buyer's agent.
as a buyer's agent, right?
No. Even as a buyer's agent, when you're writing your offer, and I've talked about this in the other videos and other classes when we're talking about rate, you want that bump also, because you don't want your buyers to be able to get cold feet and walk. You spend way too much time with your buyer. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about buyer's agents is, as a buyer's agent, and I'm saying you guys, I mean everybody in general in the state of California that works as a buyer's agent, and I don't know about other parts of the country, but you guys do everything you possibly can to make sure your buyer doesn't lose their deposit, and sometimes they deserve to lose their deposit, right? So, for example, I know that buyers get cold feet and they don't, and it's meaningless, the cold feet. They're not canceling. They don't want to cancel a deal because something's wrong with the house or there's a true emergency. They just be like, I don't know, we feel a little uncomfortable now with the payment, whatever. Doesn't matter. You've made a legal binding agreement. You signed in. Now, if they're getting quoted 6.5, I'm going to put the maximum interest rate at a minimum of 6.75, probably 7. I like that half a point jump. And especially rates are a little less volatile now, this year than they were, towards the end of the year and now the beginning of this year than they were most of last year, where they were changing by the day. But the chance of that rate changing by half a point during the course of this escrow is very slim. And so what I'm saying is that if they got quoted 6.25 or 6.5, and I put that their maximum interest rate is going to be 7, doesn't mean they have to pay 7. What it means is that if there's any incremental growth above that 6.5, as long as it's below 7, they're committed to purchase. That's what I want as a buyer's agent. And if I'm a listing agent, I want the same thing. So no, Tony, I don't want to lower their interest rate when I put that in for the maximum interest rate that they're going to accept, because then if we put 6.25 and they get their 6.5 that they were quoted, they can still cancel and they're not going to lose their deposit. We don't want that.
Okay, I was just thinking in the terms of kind of protecting their deposit and just.
But why am I protecting their? That's the thing, is I need a valid reason why, as a buyer's agent, I'm protecting the buyer's deposit from the normal course of a transaction. I want to protect them if the seller lied, the seller didn't disclose something, the property is not the condition that we believe the property to be, right? All of those things are built into the contract. I have a contingency period to make sure that all of those things are true and that I protect my buyer's deposit. But if they got loan approval at 6.5, because that's what they got quoted when they got their pre-approval letter, if the whole time it was 6.5 and then they get loan docs that it's 6.5, but I wrote a purchase agreement that says their maximum interest rate is 6.25, and they're savvy buyers and they say, you know what, we got to the end, but we've changed our mind and now we're going to cancel. And you go to tell them, no, you can't cancel because you're going to lose your deposit. You removed all your contingencies. They're going to go, no, I can't because it's 6.25. Why am I going to give them the benefit of 6.25 when they went into this with their eyes wide open, knowing they were getting 6.5?
Okay.
See, it doesn't make sense to me as an agent that I'm not going to also protect my interest. When you guys work with buyers, you work harder than you do with sellers. You got to drive them around. You got to show them multiple properties. You got to write multiple offers. When I have a listing, most of the time people just come to me. What's the hard work that I have to do? Yeah, I had to work hard to get that listing, but that listing's not going anywhere, and I know I'm going to sell it. But as a buyer's agent where I drive them around for 6 months, write 6 or 7 different offers, I'm willing to say, oh, I hope you don't lose your deposit. Oh, hell no. If you do something that I'm not advising you to do and you lose your deposit, I'm sorry. That's what happens. That's the chances. So no, I don't agree with the idea of putting everything in. Like, I'm going to protect our deposit the way the contract says. We're going to make sure the property's in the right condition. I promise you, we're going to do a home inspection. We're going to get an appraisal. We're going to do everything possible. We're going to review all the disclosures. And if you don't get everything you need, and we get to day 17 and it's time to remove your contingency for investigation, and we didn't get what we needed, or we don't like the condition of the property, then hell yeah, we're getting out of here. I'm not going to put you through that. But if we've done everything the right way and that property's in the condition you wanted it to be, everything's been disclosed properly and everything is done, and it's time to remove contingencies, you're removing contingencies. And if something happens, that's not an emergency, right? If somebody loses their job, somebody has death in the family, there's health issues, things like that, and they need to cancel, I'm going to do everything I can to fight for their deposit. But if we've done everything to the letter, we've gotten them everything they wanted to that property, and we get to the time to close and they say, oh, I don't know, I just don't feel good, or my dad doesn't like it. Well, I'm sorry. You're not in a position for you guys to cancel without putting your deposit at risk. And so I don't think that we need to start building in loopholes to give them more opportunities to cancel when they just get cold feet. I don't like that. But that's my opinion. You guys make a business decision the way you guys want to do it. If you think that's better to give them that, then go for it. But that's your business. So you can make that choice. But knowing how to do things the right way and make sure these buyers are locked in, that's what I'm going to do. And as a listing agent, I'm going to make sure you're locked in. And it's going to be in my counteroffer that you're going to agree to an increased maximum interest rate to make sure that you stay with any fluctuations in that interest rate and that you're committed to purchase the home. Plain and simple. So sorry, I got on a soapbox, Tony, but
I had you on mute. What did you say again?
And now I'm going to mute you, pal. All right, here we go. Moving on. So paragraph 3G1 is the closing cost credit, right? That's what that's for. That's where the closing cost credit should be. The only thing you're really going to counter on that is if you're not going to pay any closing costs or a reduced amount of closing costs. That's it. Or if maybe you're giving them the credit as part of an incentive, like they didn't ask for it, but you're going to give it to them. I don't know why you would do that in this market, but maybe that's why you're doing it. But the counter is very straightforward. Seller will not provide a credit for buyer's closing costs, or if we're reducing it, seller will provide buyer a closing cost credit in the amount of blank. That's it. Very straightforward. Very straightforward. This additional financing terms right here, I think now maybe less than previously the seller credits, because people used to ask for seller's credits in the old contract on additional financing terms. It's not where it goes. Now it happens less, I'm sure, because right above that in paragraph 3G1 is the seller credit to buyer, right, if any. So if the only thing that should be in paragraph 3G2 is what kind of financing terms are like how are affected, like they're qualifying for a down payment assistance program, and if they know the down payment assistance program, it should be in there what the name of it is. Or if it's an all cash offer and they want to have the backup of being able to do a hard money loan, they would write in 3G2, buyer may obtain hard money financing. That's fine. That's not a counter. I'm just giving you guys a note of what should be in there, because if they put something like credit, closing cost credits or something else to do with the financing, and we've already addressed it in one of the correct paragraphs, you don't need to address it again there. Okay. Questions so far? All right. Good. Let's move on. All right. Next, paragraph 3G3. We talked about this last week when we were talking about the buyer representation agreement, but the counter for that is if there was requested, right, and your seller's not going to pay for that, seller will not pay any obligation that the buyer may have to compensate buyer's broker. That shall solely be the responsibility for the buyer. So if this is checked, then that would be your counter for that. Okay. Now let's get into the contingency periods. I didn't address any of these things in the counters because I think that these time periods are fine as they are, and the default for all of these is that they're attached to the offer. So the only time you would counter this is if those items weren't attached. That's it. And it would just be buyer to provide verification of cash or verification of down payment and closing costs or verification of loan application with this signed counteroffer. But I would say that 99.9% of the time as listing agent, I'm getting that. Now, if you're a buyer's agent, make sure that you're including all of that. So we're going to go just skip straight down here to paragraph 3L, which is going to be the loan contingency, the appraisal, the investigations, all that stuff. We're going to get to that right now. So 3L1 is the loan contingency. If I'm changing the time period for the loan contingency from 17 days, loan contingency will be removed within blank days after acceptance. Very straightforward. There's really nothing that's critical in how you word that other than this is what the period of time is. Now, I would only reduce that 17 days if they were giving me a reduced escrow period, right? If they have an escrow period like 21 days, then I'm going to shorten the loan contingency from 17 down to probably 14 because they reduced it. I know some people do loan contingency like 10 or 12. I think that's too short. I think there's already a lot of pressure on getting things approved and the time periods and how much time we have to do things. I don't think that we need to go much less than that 14-day period if they do a shortened escrow. If it's a 30-day escrow, there's nothing wrong with the 17. Nothing. It's good. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to address it. The appraisal contingency is a little bit different. If I'm changing the appraisal contingency to be removed within 12 days of acceptance and a completed copy of the appraisal to be provided to the seller at that time. Now, the reason I add in that completed copy of the appraisal to be provided to the seller is because for the most part, the only time you're supposed to get the appraisal is if the property doesn't appraise and they're asking for a price reduction. It says then in the contract, I have to get a copy of the appraisal. I want a copy of it anyway. And I don't want them to have to fight and say, well, we can't get it or so-and-so. Hey, this is part of the contract now. I put in my counteroffer. You're going to provide me that completed copy of the appraisal so that I have it for my information, whether you close or you cancel. And I think 12 days is enough time to get the appraisal done. And the reason I do that is because I just want to make sure that the appraisal's done and everything's good to go so that we don't have that as an issue later on. Okay. If they're going to remove you're asking to remove all their contingencies with the acceptance, then it's going to be buyer agrees the appraisal contingency is removed with the acceptance of this offer. I may include a contingency removal form at that time because they didn't check this little box over here, the no appraisal contingency, if I'm asking for that. It's not something that I usually advise people to request that the buyer remove their contingencies. I just don't, that's not something I like. We all know it has to appraise anyway. Let's just handle the appraisal the right way. And that's why the reduced period of time, the 12 days. Give them a shorter period of time if there's an issue with the appraisal. Okay. Just a second, Bertha, let me finish this and then I'll get to you for your question. If we're doing something different, appraisal contingency is based on an appraised value of the original list price to remove within 12 days of acceptance, and a completed copy of the appraisal will be provided to the seller at that time. And if you're going to change it to a different price, that's it. If it's an FHA or VA, right, because you have to include the FVAC if the price is changing. So I get an offer for $600,000, I'm countering you back at $620. My FVA form that we have is at $600. I'm going to counter you back that it's the buyers to sign and return an updated FVAC with this counter offer for the correct price. Now, if I'm the listing agent and I'm raising price, I want the FVAC to be less. I want it to be like the list price, because for those of you guys that know, even if there's no appraisal contingency, if I have an FVAC, right, the FHA VA mandatory clause, whatever amount is in there, if the property doesn't appraise for that amount, the buyer doesn't lose their deposit. Okay, so you want to address that properly. If someone's writing an offer that's crazy over asking price, and I talked to somebody about this week. So I have a house listed for $600 because I know that that's what it's worth. Someone writes me an offer for $675 because they're trying to get their offer accepted, right? And it's FHA. I am going to say that their appraisal contingency is only if it doesn't appraise for the list price, like we talked about right here, right? So that what happens is if they write an offer at $675 and I was listed at $600, I'm going to say, okay, your appraisal contingency, I'll let you have it. You got 12 days, but it's only contingent on the property appraising for our offer price, our original list price, which was $600. And I'm sending you a new FVAC that you have to sign that says your deposit is only protected up to 600,000. Anything that happens over that, you're locked in at that purchase price, and I'm going to hold on to your deposit if you don't uh, close the sale, close the transaction. Bertha, go ahead and unmute. You get back to your question.
That question, maybe you address it. I've heard like many agents are submitting offers with no appraisal contingency at all.
Mhm.
But if it's FHA, that will not apply. Is that true?
It doesn't, depending on how the FVAC is filled out, right? And that's what we just talked about. So I send you an offer that's FHA, right? And I say no appraisal contingency and they usually only put no appraisal contingency because they're writing the offer over asking. That's the norm, right? That's what's happening. But they know, maybe some of them are bright enough to know that at the FVAC, if I write on there what the offer price is, right? So like in our case, the one I was just talking about, 600,000 is the list price. They write an offer at 675. Their FVAC says 675. And I counter them back and say, okay, you're writing $75,000 over, no appraisal contingency then, right? That's the counter. And they accept it. If it doesn't appraise for the 675, the FVAC will still protect them and they'll get their deposit back. So that's why I'm saying, as listing agent, I've got to address both of those things. Not only if they're going to not have an appraisal, but also what the FVAC will protect them, the amount it will protect them up to. Because I'm going to say, if you're writing over what I'm asking and I'm not asking you for that amount, then you've got to make up the difference. Now, the thing I don't like when listing agents are the ones who drive the price up. Right? They counter this higher price that's way over what their original asking price was, and then ask the buyer to remove their appraisal contingency. That bugs me, but that's just my personal opinion. So yes, but if you have the mandatory clause and it's filled out like with the original offer price and then doesn't appraise for that offer price, you don't lose your deposit whether you have an appraisal contingency or not. So yes, that's true. Okay. Oh, let me see. Tony, I think having an appraisal contingency should not be part of the contract. That would help with buyers overbidding. As listing agents, we should be informed and make better decisions. Well, I think that I agree with you. I mean, I think it should be part of the contract, but I think we can handle it properly. Right? These counters will help you handle it properly. When those buyers are writing crazy, stupid offers over asking price, because they know what's going to happen. I'm going to get my offer accepted. Because I wrote this really high offer. And then if it doesn't appraise, we're going to fix it. That's why these counters help fix that from the beginning. Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, buyer, you're writing this crazy offer over asking price. Great. You still have an appraisal contingency, but it's only as long as the property appraises for my list price, you're locked in. And I gave you a new FHA VA, a mandatory clause that says as long as the property appraises for my list price, your deposit is still at risk. If that's how you want to write your crazy overpriced offer and get it accepted, then that's how we're going to do it. And guess what will happen? All those buyers that were full of crap that weren't really going to write those big offers and continue through with those big offers, they're going to back out and you'll get the legitimate buyers that will be able to close. That's ultimately what we want as listing agent. We don't want to beat up the buyers. We don't want to punish the buyers. All we want to do is close a deal. That's it. And what these do by doing these counters is it helps us to get the buyers who are more legitimately able to close the deal. Oscar, you had a question. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Kyle. My
morning.
question is, so if you get an offer, let's say it's not by much over asking price, just a couple thousand, you counter the offer, I mean, you accept their terms and conditions, you just extend the escrow, it's for the property that I was talking to you about, where they're purchasing.
They're contingent. Yeah.
So the contingency period for the loan is not, you're not asking for them to drop it to 12 days or anything like that. You want to keep it at 17, right?
Who are you representing? You're representing the seller?
This is for the buyer for the offer. You're not asking.
So you're talking about, okay, so your seller as a buyer, right? Your seller is selling a property. They're
Yes.
buying a property contingent on selling their property. Your
Yes.
time periods, you should try to keep them the same as when you're writing an offer. My suggestion is to you guys, unless you're shortening the escrow period, you don't change the defaults. You don't change them. Let
Yeah.
the listing agent counter you back and change them. But no, you don't change them on your offer. 17 days, that's it. That's
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
actually,
No, leave it alone. But if it's a little bit over, like here's the thing, you guys have to be reasonable about it. If you have something listed for 600 and somebody writes an offer at 605, the chances of that a $5,000 appraisal not happening, unless you were wrong on your pricing for the listing, it's probably not a big deal. I'm talking about those big jumps where people are, 30, 40, $50,000 over asking price. That's the ones where you want to say, okay, I'm confident in my list price, not so confident in your price. I'm going to protect my seller, right? That's what we're talking about with those counters.
yes. I have, so another question
Uh-huh.
is, so you counter them, and during that counter, you get a couple more offers.
Okay.
So with these couple more offers, do you use them as backup offers? Or you
Well,
call
it
them up?
depends. Well, okay. So here's two things. Okay, if I wrote just a seller's counteroffer, the SCO, right, which is just that means there's one buyer I'm countering.
Yes.
If I send that counteroffer out today, and this afternoon I get two more offers that are better or the same as that offer, and I haven't gotten it returned yet from the buyer, I can send a rescission. I can send a withdrawal of offer, withdrawing that seller counteroffer and replacing it with a seller multiple counter if I want to have everybody still in the mix. As long as I haven't gotten it back, I can do that. Okay.
Okay.
If I've sent a seller's multiple counteroffer out, then I can also send a multiple counter to those two new counters or the two new offers that I received, and then make my choice off of the ones that return the seller multiple counteroffer. So it depends on what you did, but if you've already gotten the seller counteroffer that's been returned to you, that original one, then yes, those can only be backup offers. But if you haven't, you can withdraw that seller counteroffer and you can now replace it with a multiple counter and have all three of those people be options for your seller.
So the minute you send, or as soon as you send out that multiple counter offer, it withdraws the first counter
You
offer?
have to send, there's a form called withdrawal of offer. You have to
Okay.
send those together, a withdrawal of offer and the seller's multiple counter offer. And if they haven't returned to you the seller counter offer that you sent out, then that withdraws it and replaces it.
Okay.
Okay. But that's why I always tell everybody, even when you only have one offer, use a seller multiple counter offer. Just gives you way more flexibility. Bertha, you had your hand up again. What was your question?
Yes, adding to, I do agree on what you said. I had that specific situation on one of my listings a couple of years ago. So the buyer's agent didn't reply, and I got couple of more offers. So I called the hotline, and one of the lawyers told me I have to call that buyer's agent first. And
Yeah,
over
you
the
should.
phone, I did the notice, like, we're gonna back up, and then I sent the in writing, and I was totally covered. So yeah,
Okay.
just adding to one of past experiences, and I cover myself pretty well. Thank you.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad somebody used the withdrawal of offer. It's not something that people use very often, but it exists, and it's something that we could do. And I think what happens a lot of times is people think like, well, I already sent out a counter offer. That's it. I'm stuck. Well, if you haven't gotten it back, there's still some flexibility in that. Okay, so I was hoping that we would finish counter offers today. It looks like we're not, so we're gonna have to finish them next Thursday, and I'll add some stuff in there for you. But before I go, does anybody have any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. We'll complete these counter offers next Thursday. Again, go ahead and email me if you're interested in the printout, the PDF of those possible counters that you can use as kind of a template for yourself to write counters. And if there's nothing else, guys, I appreciate you being here, and I can't wait to see you again next week. Take care.